Well, we want to welcome you again to our series, Leading When You're Not the Boss, a discussion of middle leadership. I'm Zack, Executive Associate Pastor of Lovejoy Gospel Church, and it's been great for us to be together for these sessions. In our last session, our eyes were open to middle leaders in the Bible and what we can learn from their lives, and I trust that was an encouraging but also a challenging lesson for you. Today we're going to begin a discussion of 4 what I call success keys for leadership. Today we're going to start off a discussion of success on what I believe is the most important, and that's our attitude. I call this being a good co-pilot. We're focusing on the idea when we talked at the beginning about a jet, someone who flies a jet, and a co-pilot who really follows his pilot's instructions. Being an influencer doesn't start on the outside. Being an influencer starts on the inside. Here's a great quote by Hugh Downs. "A happy man is not one with a certain set of circumstances, but a certain set of attitudes." I want you to think about that in light of how we deal with life many times. This is huge. Your values add value to you. The first of these attitudes that I'd like to talk to you about is what I call a servant's heart. That is being humble. You must know how to follow before you can lead. Humility and humbleness in some secular circles when they train leadership, I don't know if that's one of the top leadership qualities that they teach. How to be a success, humility. But I can tell you that in God's kingdom, humility and being a servant are right there at the top of the list. You must know how to follow before you can lead. To follow, you need to do what your leader has assigned to you, the way that your leader wants you to do it. In your notes, let your vision be within the vision of your leader. Otherwise, it's division. Put yourself and your energies in making the head leader's vision come to pass. 18 years ago, when I came to Lovejoy Gospel Church, some of the leaders in the church said to me, "What is your vision?" And I was able to share with them because of some of the things that I experienced. I said, my vision is to make Pastor Ron Bergio's vision come to pass. I'm going to put all my energies, all I've learned, and all of my abilities into making his vision come to pass. Ultimately, though, we serve the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to read you a powerful verse of Scripture. It's in Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 to 25. It says, "Bondservants," and that's talking about us, "obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men's pleasers," not just doing it when they're watching us, in other words, "but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord's Christ. But he who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done, and there is no partiality." Whatever we do in serving our local church and in serving our head leader, our pastor, our executive, or whoever we're serving, we need to do it with our whole heart. We need to do that even in menial things and things that may not seem to be that important. I remember years ago somebody had come to me when I was involved and I was overseeing a ministry to the inner city for children. And I was always looking for good volunteers. We had a wonderful ministry going. On a Saturday, we'd have as many as 50 to 100 children that would come out. And we had them broken up into groups, and we would minister. And we saw many children come to Christ. But my biggest problem was having workers that would come and sustain and build a relationship with those kids. So a young man came to me one day and said, "Oh, I heard about your ministry, about how excited it is. I would love to come and join you." He says, "I can preach and I can sing and I can lead worship." And I said, "Can you come along and just go out on the streets and reach out to kids? Can you pass out loaves of bread to their families?" And he kind of looked at me strange. And he kind of hung his head and walked away. He seemed very, very disappointed. He seemed like somehow I had said something wrong to him. I said the exact thing to him. Are you willing to come alongside and do what the leader needs, not what you think is important? So here's the thing. We need to lead by example in this way. We need to grab a towel before we're willing to receive a title. We need to serve our pastor and our head leader, and there are great rewards for doing that. There's the reward of what Jesus said, that if you will serve, if you will humble yourself, you will be exalted. There's also the promise of grace. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humbles. If you want grace in the things you do for God, be a humble servant. Also, our faith grows as we take on a servant's role. Remember what Jesus said about the centurion. He said, I have not seen so great a faith, no, not in Israel. And it was because that man understood authority. He said, I'm under authority, and I also have people under me. He understood accountability and authority. He understood the need to be a servant. And so he had great faith. And when you serve, you will find that your faith will surge and to grow. If we will humble ourselves and serve where we are called, we will be a people who will see great fruit. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is a thing that I call faithfulness. Faithfulness. Faithfulness is a firm commitment to a duty or to a person. I want you to look at a verse of Scripture with me in Hebrews 13:17. It says this, obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. In other words, we should submit ourselves and be faithful to our leaders because it benefits us. It benefits the people that we are. We need to understand that they are accountable to God for what they do. And I believe that this is something that God is saying to us. As we are submissive, then it makes their job easier. As we understand faithfulness, as we understand the need to be faithful. Now, I want to say something to you. If you are looking to be a head leader, the key is to serve another leader. Luke chapter 16:12 says this, if you've not been faithful with what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? We need to first be faithful what is somebody else's. Be faithful to that. Be committed to the duty of that, to be committed to that person. Now, I want to say to you that faithfulness is more than just having been there for a long time. Sometimes when we talk about faithfulness, we say, he or she is so faithful. They've been coming to this church for years, or they've been involved in this activity for a long time. I want to say to you that faithfulness is more than just showing up. Faithfulness is buying in. Faithfulness is taking ownership. Faithfulness is commitment to the success of that head leader. Do you got it? It's more than just showing up. Well, anybody's willing to show up, but are you buying in? Are you taking on ownership? And so it's not just that they've been faithful for 20 years, but what have we been faithful to? What have we been committing ourselves to? The third quality of attitude that I think is important is what I call focus. Focus. And this is especially true in the life of a middle leader, because I think that sometimes it's easier to focus as a senior leader because you have, as it were, the vision before you. But for us as middle leaders to stay focused to that vision could be a little more difficult. But focus is absolutely essential to our position. I want to talk to you again about Elisha. Elisha burned his plow, and we need to burn our plow. What do I mean by that? Well, we need to concentrate on what you are doing right now, day by day, not what you were in the past, nor what you could be in the future. When Elisha burned his plow, he was burning his past. That's what he always did. He was also burning up his future, what that plow would be to him in the days ahead. But he focused on that. When Elijah hit him with that mantle, he knew his life was going to be different. He knew he had a different calling. And so he had to focus on what it was that he was supposed to do. Psalm 90, verses 12 to 17, has always been something that has been an encouragement to me. It's been one of my favorite verses. I was asked recently, what is something that God has been teaching you in recent years? And I was able to share with them, it's been very, very simple. That I would focus day by day, that I would wake up and I would do what I can. I would focus what I'm supposed to do. There's so many distractions. It says in Psalm 90, verses 12 to 17, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our heart to wisdom. Satisfy us early with your mercy, and we may rejoice and be glad. Let the beauty of the Lord be upon us. All those things are right there in those verses. It's the idea of, Lord, teach me daily to focus. Don't meditate on what I have done, good or bad. I could say, well, man, when I was this great person in the past, and now I feel stuck. Or what I could be doing. And you know something? Vision is okay. But if we're being distracted about what we could be, that is wrong. Focus day by day on what God has for you. No matter what others are saying in your outline, doing or not doing, move forward in the right direction. We can be discouraged by somebody doing something wrong, or somebody should be doing this. Why isn't somebody taking care of this? How many times have you heard that? Why aren't we taking care of this need? Or somebody ought to be doing that. We have this famous person in churches. It's called somebody. We don't know who somebody is. They're just out there somewhere. But somebody ought to take care of this. Somebody ought to do that. And sometimes people will try to distract us by the somebody that they think you are that ought to be taking that. You need to always make sure that you are focused on what it is that God has called you to. As you work hard, listen to this, day by day, the greater callings of God will happen in your life. Now, the other thing that I wanted to share with you, and the next thing, number 4, that is so, so important. This may be one of the most important things to a head leader, is a thing called loyalty. This may be one of the very important ones, the most important. Loyalty is giving and showing, listen, giving and showing constant support through good or bad. Let me tell you something, and I want you to write this down. You don't really know if you're loyal until it's tested. You don't know. You could say you're loyal, but until it's tested, you don't know. Because what happens is conflicts will arise and people will talk. Listen to this here. Here's something to remember. The pastor, we already read this, Hebrews 13:7. The pastor is accountable to God, but the associate or the middle leader is accountable to the pastor and God. We need to make sure that. Don't try to outshine your pastor. Don't take the opportunities that he gives you and use them to draw attention to yourself. The head leader sees things that other people in the organization don't see. And you need to make certain that you don't usurp that position. Recently, I spoke at our church a message, and a person came up to me and said, because the next week the pastor was going to continue on that. He says, I don't know how the pastor is going to top that. That was the comment they made to me. And I was able to say to them, the pastor and I are not in competition. We're a part of the same team. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, there was this whole contention about who was of Paul, who was of Apollos, who was of Cephas or Peter. And then some said, well, we're not of any man, we're of Christ. And Peter said, all of us are working together as the same team to accomplish a great purpose. People can complain about things. This thing about leaders, what leaders see that we don't see. People can complain, things they don't understand. I had somebody, again, we recently painted our sanctuary, or painted our foyer a different color. And the Christian Ed wing of our church, we painted that a different color. I preached this message, and right after that, a lady comes up to me, and she's got this big skull. I thought she wasn't happy with my message, but she said to me, I don't like the color. I don't like the colors in church. I think I'm going to leave. Literally, that's exactly what she said to me. And she wanted me to pray with her, and I just simply said to her, she said to me, well, what do you think about the colors? Now, I got to share this with you. I didn't choose the colors. And I thought the colors were good. I thought they were okay. But here's the real issue with me. I didn't care about the colors. And I was able to share that with her. I said to her, you know what? I don't care about the colors. I care whether Jesus shows up in the church. And I didn't say that to put her down, but in my own gentle way, I was able to say, I don't care about the colors. And so when people come to us, they don't see what the head leader sees. Sometimes you will need to choose between the friendship and flattery of the people or the support of your head leader. Oh, you know, Pastor Andy, you preach better than the pastor. Well, you know, here's the deal. Our pastor has to get a message up every week, and so he gives me my one opportunity that I prepare for forever, and I lay that word on them, and everybody's all excited about this message that I've spoken. Keep it in perspective, middle leaders, of what your pastor walks through, and don't be bent by the flattery of the people. You know, it says in the Proverbs that as gold is tested by fire, so praise tests the heart of men. When you're praised, make sure you give the glory to Christ and never use it to undermine your leader. Do you know, sometimes conflict comes and people take sides. You know, why was that decision made? Why was that person fired from the staff? Why did that person leave? And, you know, they won't come to someone who they don't think is going to listen to them. So sometimes they'll come to you and they'll talk to you. And I have to say this to you, that I can honestly, before God and before you today, say, in 18 years of being a senior pastor, I have never undermined Pastor Ron Bergio with that type of thing. And perhaps one of the reasons is that I've had some of my own hurts in that area. I remember as a senior partner, or senior pastor, that there were people who hurt me. So I could say this, is that through the wounds, God has taught me loyalty. He's taught me loyalty through the things that I have experienced. And so we need to respond. We need to not agree and say, I think you're right. I can understand what you're saying. David's respect was not necessarily for Saul, but for the office that he held. You may be in a situation sometimes where you may feel that the senior leader is being unfair. But don't go out and agree with people. This is destructive. I can see it. I can see what you're saying. We are in a covenant relationship with our senior leader, and it should be hard for us to even consider talking about that. Impossible for us. Never undermine your senior leader. Listen to this. Noah's sons, in your outline, Noah's sons covered his shortcomings. Now, that doesn't mean that we cover up things that are morally or ethically wrong. But sometimes the things that people are upset with our head leader, are just picayune little things. He didn't shake my hand. It's sort of like the person that's walking out of church, and they go. The pastor, maybe his mind went blank for a few minutes, and they shook his hand, and he wasn't paying attention. So they go out to their car, and the devil begins to argue. Begins to work in their minds. It's the pastor didn't respond to me very well today. I wonder if something's wrong. And as you're driving down the street, or you're walking down the street, or going home, you begin to hear this voice that says, I wonder if the pastor doesn't like me. And by the time you get home, you say, the pastor hates my guts. I'm not going back there. Listen, don't listen to those voices. Let those voices be quelled. This is the next thing that I want to share with you, is that you need to trust. That you need to trust your leaders. But remember Noah's sons covered his shortcomings. If you feel there's a problem and you have that kind of relationship with your senior pastor, say, listen, I just want to let you know when this happened. All right, you've assigned me to talk to certain people, but they feel that when I talk to them, you're not talking to them. Sometimes as an associate, you're given a responsibility. I'm the care pastor in my church, so if I visit them and the pastor didn't visit them, they think the pastor doesn't care. I have to always make sure that I assure them, I am here in the place of the senior pastor. He does care about you. But maybe sometimes there needs to be some intervention with the pastor. This is how I cover the pastor's shortcomings, as I may go to him and say, listen, this one person that I went to see, you may need to visit them. You may need to call them. They may need a little bit of your special attention. And that way, I'm taking duties off of my pastor, but I need to alert him to situations that may need his attention. I want to talk to you about the next issue, and that issue is trust. To me, trust is completely huge. We need to have trust towards others, but we need to build it towards ourselves. We need to build trust. The building of trust in ministry and in relationships and on our job cannot be overstated. I don't know if there's any sadder statement but to hear these words. I love you, but I don't trust you. There's a half a relationship there, because I believe trust is equally as important as love. I believe that trust is something. And so sometimes people will do things. Sometimes maybe people in a moment will make a very, very stupid decision. Maybe even a character decision. And the question is as to whether or not we forgive them. Listen, forgiveness is instantaneous, but trust takes time to build. Listen to this. We need to believe the best about our leaders. Believe the best about them. Don't presume that your concerns are not theirs. Trust your leader. The issue again of walking by you, or maybe you don't feel like you're getting enough attention. Believe the best about your leader. Now, this is interesting. Some of the trust is given without performance, but most of trust must be earned. I heard a great statement recently from a friend of mine. He shared this with me. You can't build trust in a day, but daily you can build trust. So just be encouraged that trust is so important in that church relationship. The next key, number 7, is overcoming offense. This is absolutely crucial. The word in the Greek for offense is scandalon. It's the idea of a scandaler, being scandalized. And what it means is to put a snare or a stumbling block in the way. Now remember, offense is not just that something happened. It's how that thing that happened affects you. So when an offense happens, it's when conflict takes us by surprise. It's when we're overlooked for recognition or for our opinion. It's when we feel like we've been criticized unfairly, and maybe we have some false expectations that are not realized. We become offended. So sometimes, on your outlines, it is best to forgive and let go of the offense. Sometimes, there's been times where there's been no forum to deal with that offense. It would have been more harmful to try to deal with it. So sometimes it's best to release it. Look what it says in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. And this is referring back to Proverbs chapter 10. It's the same thing. Listen, and above all things, have fervent love for one another. What does it mean to have fervent, burning love, that we in the church should really, really love each other? What does that mean? For love covers a multitude of sins. Sometimes it's best to just let it go, to release it. And then the next verse, Colossians 3:13. Bearing, this is so powerful, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you must also do. In that verse, it's not saying there was any forum to talk about your problem. It doesn't say that you got a chance to tell somebody that they offended you. It says, if you have a complaint, just forgive. Just release it. I'm sharing with you, sometimes in life, just give up your right that you had, that thing didn't happen to you. Give it to God. Let Him deal with it. But there are times when you do need to deal with it. But here's the thing. Be an avid supporter in public. Deal with the problems, concerns, and constructive criticism in private. Let me say that you need to be an avid supporter of your head leader. You need to be supporting him in public. And if you have an issue to deal, you make that a private matter. I remember a number of times our senior pastor would say things to me, to our staff, to others in our church that are being raised in leadership. He would say, you can say anything you want to in my office. But when we go out there, we are together as a team. We are of one mind and one purpose. So we need to, if you want to deal with the idea of offense, how do we deal with it? A lot of people go talk to somebody else. They tell somebody else when they're offended. But the Bible is so clear about how we're supposed to deal with offense. Matthew 18:15-20 says, if your brother offends you, go to him. Go talk to him. Because it says if you go talk to him and you keep it between you and him, you gain your brother. Now, if it's that serious an offense, then you need to bring other people afterwards. But you don't bring other people into it until you deal with it with that person. I had somebody that came to me about a leader that was working under me in the church. And he said, and they said their name. It was, at the time, the person was our youth pastor years ago. He says, I love Pastor so-and-so, but I've been so offended, and he just really messed up, and, this. And I said, and I gave them this instruction. I said, if you will go to him, and you will talk to him. This is what I said to this woman. I said, if I straighten it out, it'll get straightened out. I will talk to the youth pastor. I'm sure it will get straightened out. But you will not gain him as a brother. Your relationship will not be stronger in the process. But if you go to him and you talk to him and you work it out, your relationship will be stronger. And that's our whole goal, is that we have stronger relationships. Well, she said to me, she says, I couldn't do that. I love him so much, I don't want to hurt him. And I said, how many people have you told this to? She said, only 6. Only 6 people. She was too afraid to hurt him to his face, but hurt him behind his back. We need to take offense to the right place. And if it's with our senior pastor, we need to go to him and talk to him. Remember something very, very powerful. And this is also helpful, and this is that attitude. You may have been guilty of the same thing you are offended about. I love Ecclesiastes 7:21-22. It just says, don't listen too much to something that would offend you. Don't listen to the criticism. Don't listen to it, because you've been guilty of the same thing in the past. This has helped me so much. And also, see conflict as a spiritual battle. We don't blame everything on the devil, but he certainly is one that is there. Ephesians chapter 6:20 says, it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Do we believe that? Do we really believe that in ministry? That we think at times we're wrestling with those people. But the real issues, or we're wrestling with our leadership. No, the real battle is spiritual. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, it's talking about a conflict that Paul is dealing with and the need to forgive and have reconciliation, because he says, we don't want to let the devil outfox us because we are not ignorant of his devices. And so the devil might not start the fire, but he certainly tries to throw logs on that fire to keep it going. And we need to stop throwing logs on it and let it go out. So this thing about offense is huge. Sometimes people bury those offenses. Sometimes we need to release them. Sometimes we need to deal with them. The next character quality and the next area of attitude that I want to talk about is what I call peacemaking. And you know, as a middle leader, this area is one that you're going to deal with quite a bit. You're going to find yourself in a position where one of your responsibilities is to make peace. Peacemaking is putting unity and harmony in the work environment or the larger group above your own. It's the idea of letting there be unity and harmony in the organization, putting it above your own desires. This is very, very important because you're going to, again, find yourself, and you need to understand something, is that there's times where people are going to try to build walls. You need to be one who builds a bridge in that context. Building bridges instead of walls, finding common ground, understanding differences in personality and perspective. Sometimes God uses the middle leader, listen, as a liaison between the head leader and the other workers. You see, sometimes you are in that position where people, you need to be the liaison. You need to bring them together, and you need to try to build a bridge in that setting. Number 8, character. We could teach a whole session on character, the importance of character for any leader. But the place to develop character is before you get into that head spot. It's while you're still in this middle role, you should be developing character, integrity, fidelity, purity. You're not perfect, but you're pursuing what is right and good and holy, avoiding the current cultural direction, fleeing from the pitfalls. There's a number of very, very good verses there. Psalm 86:11 says, give me a united heart. Unite my heart to fear your name. Integrity is the idea of wholeness. It's the idea that all of me, Lord, I'm giving it to you. There's no hidden areas. I'm coming to you. I'm asking you to deal with me, to search me, that I might walk with you so I can have a deeper relationship with you. Our hearts are very, very important. All these verses, it talks about the heart. It says, blessed are the pure in heart, having a united heart. Having a heart, our heart is so precious before the Lord, and it also is precious before people. They know when something is wrong in your heart. You could be having an outer cover of smiles and personality, but people know when there's something wrong in our hearts. People are watching us on your outlines. A clear conscience will be the difference between example and reproach. We need to develop character and good habits before we assume an important leadership role. Many leaders in all sphere of life, in the church, in the business, in sports, many leaders will not be remembered for their successes. They will be remembered for the moment of indiscretion that happened in their life. That's how people are going to remember them. God forgives. People don't always forgive right away. So we need to be a people that don't ruin or become disqualified by our lack of character. When attacks and floods come, you will stand if you stand in integrity. The last thing that I want to share with you, and I think this is also very important, and this is very, very special for the middle leader, for the associate pastor, for the executive underneath of a head executive. I call it contentment. Contentment is not complacency, because actually you become more motivated when you're content. It's the idea of understanding that wherever you are, you can be content. Maybe the promotion that you're looking for hasn't come yet, but you can be content in that place. You understand that promotion is from the Lord. Psalm 75:6-7 says, promotion doesn't come from the east and the west, but promotion comes from the Lord. He lifts up one, He puts down another. That has given me great, sometimes in my frustrating moments when I've wanted a higher position, the Lord has given me this verse. Remembering that to whom much is given, much is required. Listen, servants are free. Servants are free. The servants in the story of the water turned to wine only had to listen to Jesus' instructions. He told them to dip the water out and take it. Whatever happened to that water on the way from the buckets to the head of the wedding was up to Jesus, not up to them. They were free as a bird. Listen, when decisions don't go your way, when a position doesn't happen for you, when people don't like you, put it into God's hands. I want to talk to you about a thing I call the circle of concern and the circle of influence. But, the grass is always greener over the sewer. The grass is always greener somewhere else. That is a source of discontentment. If I was somewhere else, if I was doing something else, it would always be better. The grass is greener over the sewer. Francis of Assisi had a thing called a serenity prayer. And it said, Lord, grant me the serenity to change the things I can change, to accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. This thing I call the circle of concern that's on your outline and circle of influence. The circle of influence that's within the circle represents you're being able to, the things that you directly can influence, the things you directly have people respond to, the people in your life that influence you. The circle of concern are the things that you can do nothing about. And our tendency might be to focus on the things that we can do nothing about, to focus on our circle of concern. And now, the principle is, when you focus on your circle of concern, the outer circle, your circle of influence actually shrinks. I've seen this in, like, if I have a concern at work that I can't do anything about, I take that concern home and I'm miserable around my wife. I actually lose influence at home. But when I focus on what I can do, when I focus on my circle of influence, my circle of influence actually increases. I am content to allow God to use me within that circle. I say, I will not focus on what I can do nothing about. I want to give you a few examples of that. Sometimes you try to reach out to people. Sometimes we as pastors feel like we have to be everything to everybody. And we try to reach out to people and we say, I want to help you. Well, they refuse our advice and they don't want our help. And we feel really deflated. We feel really bad. Listen, don't cast pearls. Those people are not bad people, but don't cast pearls before people that don't want to receive them. Go where God, you pray for them. Don't say you're writing them off completely, but just put your energies where God is open the door for you. Listen, there's a God, and you and I are not Him. He is God. We are His servants. It really gives us great, great contentment. There was a situation in our church where I premarital counseled a couple, but they had our senior pastor do the wedding. And they invited some other pastors to be a part. And they also invited me to be a part. But my part in the wedding was very, very, very small. And I began to get a little bit resentful about that. I feel I'd really poured into this couple, but when it really came time, they wanted the senior pastor to. Remember, I served the senior pastor. But I felt my energies had gone in there. And it caused me to, I was focusing on my circle of concern. And then something changed in my heart. I realized something. They didn't invite any other associate pastor, any other middle leader to be a part of their wedding but me. They had such a respect for me and my ministry that they said, we're going to let you in. And when I looked at it from that perspective, I realized that my circle of influence was large with them. Now, if I had focused on my concern in that situation, if I had gotten mad, so I'm not going to that wedding, I'm not going to be involved, my circle of influence would have shrunk. So be a person who is content in your role. Contentment doesn't mean you sit back and you're complacent, but just put your energies in what you can do. And guess what? Your circle of influence is going to begin to expand. Let's look very quickly at what I call a middle leader's rewards. A middle leader's rewards. And all of these things I've shared with you about character and leading and serving and attitudes. Attitudes produce something. Attitudes produce something very, very special. What is a middle leader's rewards? First of all, if you will serve faithfully, if you will serve in loyalty, if you will have character, if you will serve as one who overcomes offense, if you will be a person of trust, if you will focus, guess what? You will gain the trust and friendship of your head leader. Guess what? You will also gain the love, respect, and support for those around you. You will find yourself that working with a team, you will accomplish more than you ever could do alone because your attitude is right. And also, you're working in an environment of success. And lastly, you will find in the long run that there are both monetary and eternal rewards. I challenge you today to embrace these attitudes that are hard in our world today. Our world is running contrary to these attitudes. But as a leader, if you will do these things, you will find God greatly bless your life. In our next session, we will be encouraged and challenged to become all that God has intended us to be by a discussion of our potential, by using and developing our abilities. I'd like to very quickly go over the questions that you can break up in groups of 3 and begin to discuss these particular questions. The group discussion questions are, number 1, what are the traits of a servant's heart? Why are they important in middle leadership? Number 2, describe a faithful person. What are the challenges of being faithful today? Number 3, list the reasons why we should be loyal to our head leader. What are the challenges to living this out? Number 4, explain the circle of concern and the circle of influence. What happens when you focus on your circle of concern? What happens when you focus on the circle of influence? How does this help you find contentment? And number 5, discuss why character is so important in leadership and ministry. Why does it matter? Until the next time, the next session, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you. God has exciting things for us as we continue to learn about being an effective, influential middle leader.